people might still be hung up on the whole thing because it was quickly developed. And, but the thing is that coronavirus vaccines, and I'm talking coronavirus as a whole, not just COVID vaccines. The coronavirus vaccines have been in development for a long time. Could you speak to that at all and kind of explain that these vaccines have been around for a long time and it's
Sure.
not just a sudden thing?
Right. The theory of a coronavirus vaccine, dates a couple decades. So we go back and look at that, and then the identification and naming of coronavirus goes back to the 1930s. So we're coming up on we're going to be hitting the century mark that this has been around. I think when we hear novel coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 as a new virus, there's this immediate thought process that this is new and it's been dormant in some world that we didn't know about for forever. And how did this happen? But the coronavirus family is a well-known virus family in the science world and the medical world. It attaches to the common cold. Many people have heard of SARS, MERS, which was the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. So a lot of respiratory viruses have a coronavirus trait. So it stands to reason that the development of vaccines for that have also been around for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to the early 90s, and there was trials around trying to create a coronavirus vaccine specific to a canine coronavirus, which another element is, okay, why haven't I heard of that one? Or, whatever the next one is, why haven't I heard of that one? Where SARS-CoV-2 separates itself from other coronaviruses, unfortunately, is it's highly transmissible. So from person to person, highly transmissible. But it made that leap from animal to human and didn't just infect one human, even if it was highly virulent,
mm-hmm.
and then go away. So SARS and MERS especially, MERS was known as highly virulent, but it wasn't very transmissible. So you couldn't just stand in a room and say, hey, 1 in 4 people are going to get this. And now with the Delta variant, stand in a room and say, if you're unmasked, pretty high likelihood probably going to get it. It was that the transmissibility was very low, but highly virulent, so a lot of mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So those types of viruses, they tend to burn themselves out. And by the time you can develop a vaccine, it may be a non-issue because you space out and, it runs its course.
Right.
This has continued to find a way to be transmissible and to change through variants and mutations. And that's where it's, continuing to wreak havoc that it is today. But there were vaccines that were focused at some of those earlier approaches. And really, it comes back to what we talked about in the very beginning with how FDA approval works. And if you go all the way back to the investment from a lab and clinical trials, manufacturing, we didn't really talk about manufacturing, but millions and millions of dollars go into the manufacturing and trials. And so when you have a virus that's starting to burn itself out, the funding's not there.
Right.
Those other viruses didn't cause a worldwide pandemic that shut the world down.
Right.
So they just simply weren't there and then continued to go. But what's interesting, if you look back at some of those early vaccines, the spike protein that we talk about was where they targeted.
Mm-hmm.
That also helped the speed of this vaccine being created, because another element of hesitancy is how on earth can this happen so fast? Because we believe it's a brand new virus. It was a brand new type of virus in the same family, so we knew a lot about it. And we believe that the speed, when we're hesitant, we believe that the speed was such that you had to cut corners or something had to be missed. But what we forget is we had a framework to start to work off of. We had those 2 decades of or a vaccine towards coronavirus, so we kind of knew some things worked, some things didn't.
So they kind of adapted
Absolutely.
some of that stuff.
Yeah, and some of the scientists that were involved with this had been involved with some of those earlier developments. So, they looked at this when that genetic code was unlocked and shared amongst the world, because it was no longer a competitive, I want to hold on to this and create the vaccine. It was shared amongst the world, and whoever can create it create it.
Right.
So you had scientists that already had decades of experience that were able to say, okay, we're not going to take that misstep, so we can go to we know these don't work. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped from a speed standpoint. And then you go back to removing barriers such as funding and manufacturing. A cool point in the manufacturing piece is that because those barriers were removed, Pfizer, as they were trialing certain batches of the vaccine, they went ahead and produced millions of doses to say, if this one works, it's already ready.
Right.
And when we get the EUA, emergency use, it's already ready.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the timeline of normal production, we get the green light to say everything works. Now let's start the production of it, and we'll build up to that and send it out, because we can't take the risk of developing something in manufacturing and having it in a box ready to go to only be told this isn't the right one. But in this case, that was removed and said, no, run those parallel processes, develop and manufacture at the same time. So when development says green light, this works, manufacturing says we're done.
Right.
And now it comes to deployment.
This was a clip of the Good Samaritan Healthcast. If you want to hear more of what you just heard, just head on over to gshvin.org/healthcast.